I don't always assume that it's. I give it a couple of seconds, and then then we're actually going live.
So yeah, it says live for me too. So
okay, great. So all right. So anybody who happens to be watching this right now, or if you're watching this in the future, I have a special guest today. This is Colin Phillips from Radio Dish Dash. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah.
Okay, good. And he's the designer of Skirmish Outbreak, which is a brand new miniature skirmish game, which I discovered, I think it was a week or two before Gencon, which is a week or two before it came out. And so, Colin, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got into gaming?
Okay, so yeah, way back in the depths of time and history. One of the things I've said it a few times now, many years ago, I came across a book called Skirmish Wargaming by Donald Featherston. Donald Featherston, the grandfather of wargaming, right? I was somewhere 10 or 12 years of age. I was absolutely fascinated by the idea of this book, and basically became the person that constantly took it out of the library time and time again, to the point where it probably took me 20 years before I got my own copy, but it was one of these things that it started the concept for me, with the little Airfix toys, of the idea that you could possibly game and do wargaming. From there, I then discovered, as most people do, Dungeons and Dragons. Very quickly left Dungeons and Dragons behind because this thing called RuneQuest came out, which for me was the de rigueur game that I played for many years, followed by Call of Cthulhu and all those other great role-playing games. Still a very active role player. And for a while there, I put wargaming to the side because of the cost. It was just too expensive. And then, as you start working and you're getting a bit of money by you and all the rest of it, I went back to wargaming and did the whole Warhammer and tried that out, and it didn't ever quite do what I wanted it to do. And I think the game that kind of really resonated most for me was Mordheim, when Mordheim came in, because it was back to that small skirmish, small unit, individuality, and it was just a fantastically fun game that you could play in an evening with a few friends, and and you could have a campaign and all those things, all those great things that you play.
For a long time, yeah, for a long time, I considered that my favorite GW game of all time, so I certainly understand.
Yeah, definitely, and that whole mindset, which was you could come to it, you could pick it up, you could play it, you could play one-offs, you could play campaigns. It was gorgeous, and of course, GW being GW, they kill it and push it away. And then, so I've always been kind of writing my own games and doing bits and pieces. Like I write my own role-playing games. I was writing my own war games, and then. The little bit background, Force on Force came out, and I thought, oh, this is great. It's going to be all about Afghanistan, which really interested me. I bought the rules. They weren't the rules I wanted them to be, and that's not knocking Force on Force. They just didn't suit me. So I wrote Skirmish Sangin. Skirmish Sangin came out, and that was successful. And off the back of Skirmish Sangin, we'd always wanted to do a zombie game. So we took some of the mechanics and changed some mechanics for the genre, and we ended up writing our own version of a zombie game, which was Skirmish Outbreak. And as part of that, we came up with this background that we felt fitted the world in which we wanted to play. Right.
Well, let's back up to Skirmish Sangin a bit then. That, if I remember correctly, that was built on a percentile system that was that an outgrowth of your RuneQuest and other basic role-playing gaming?
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to wargaming in the early days, percentage dice and D20s were definitely around. This idea of D6 for wargaming has only kind of really come from, well, hasn't really come from Workshop, but it's been pushed to the nth degree from Workshop. I mean, the D6 has been around forever, but the concept of let's make every game D6, and I've never been a lover of a D6 based game. And I like the idea of percentages. To me, it's very easy to do maths when I've only got to add or take away percentages. I can do those maths in my head. And so we came up with this idea that we basically had been watching all these live camera video stuff from the troops over there in Afghanistan, and we wanted to see whether we could replicate it. So we actually started initially with RuneQuest and tried to use that mechanic, and that was just too big and too bogged down, and so we twisted it and turned it and changed it and wrote our own rules. And it moved on and moved on and moved on until it became the game we now play, Skirmish Outbreak, which we've been very fortunate that we have a big group of people now around the world playing it and getting into it.
Right. No, it does seem to be very popular.
Yeah, and we're fortunate that it seems to be growing and growing, and obviously, you know, we're creating more products for it. And then from that, what we wanted to do was the zombie aspect. You know, because we were all Walking Dead fans, we were all Romero fans, we were all into 28 Days Later, you know. The zombie horror movies are probably the only horror movies I tend to watch. You know, I'm not a big horror movie fan, but there was always something kind of cool about, you know, how do you survive, you know, against this endless marching dead, you know what I mean? I love that mindset. And so that was all those things are what we tried to capture and tried to put together when we wrote Skirmish Outbreak. And that's why we were keen to keep the background very clear. We've got this idea of rages in the game. Mm-hmm. Okay. And that concept, conceptually, rages are from 28 Days Later, right? Right. You know, we loved that concept of the game, but we also liked the slow, shambling, Walking Dead style zombies. And so our mindset was like, how can we take these two entities and push them together? Because people tended to be one camp or the other. You know, you either had super zombies or you had really slow zombies. And we wanted this kind of contrast between the two. So we wrote the mythos, the background of why this would work. And within the mythos, it's basically within the first 48 hours of infection that you're in this raging style aspect where it races around trying to infect as many people as possible. And then the idea is that the disease kind of goes into a semi-hibernation aspect to prolong the dead as long as possible, which is why you get the shambler aspect, or as we call it, or the Z. And so you've got that aspect there where you can, you know, you start off with a game with a whole load of Zs, but when one of your team gets bitten, suddenly you've got a Rager, and they're far more difficult to beat than the Zs.
Right. So one of the differences between, because the game system for Outbreak is similar to, but not the same as Skirmish Sangan. So this is a D20. So can I assume then essentially you're still working with the percentages, but in groups of 5?
Definitely. The reason for moving to a D20 was just some of the feedback that we had got with Skirmish Sangan. Skirmish Sangan was much more intricate, much more detailed, right? Right. For a genre that was more zombie and fantastic and fantasy based, it needed to have less of the detail and more of the playability of around fast and furious, right? And one of the aspects we looked at that was go, okay, instead of plus 5%, but plus 10%, you know, bring it down to plus 1s and plus 2s. So the best way to do that was to produce it through a D20 system. So we kept a lot of the mechanic, but we changed it to a D20 system. We used templated characters as opposed to, you know, you roll your own character and create it, you know. So you now buy numerous templates, you know, so you can buy a professional or an elite or a youth or, you know, a civilian. And then you put your group together, just like how you would have done in Mordheim, where you bought, you know, your Skaven leader and your I think you had different levels, you know, and the idea is you build your band that needs to go out into the zombie apocalypse and survive. And of course, the prerequisite is you are always looking for supplies, and so that's what you're always going out into the world for, because you know you can't just live in a lockdown environment forever, because you're going to run out of things. So the first game is always going out looking for food, and then if you manage to score enough points. So basically, if you spend 250 points on your group, you have to earn 250 points in the game. If you don't, you then roll to see what your next mission is. If you do, you get to choose what your next mission is. And so this whole campaign aspect came into it as well. Yeah,
I was actually, once I got the game, and because in your Meeples and Miniatures interview, you sort of talked around the campaign a little bit, but you mentioned things that got me really excited, but never really dove into it. And for me, the thing that really stood out about the way the campaign worked, when I finally, you know, when you sent me a copy and I got to take a look at it, was that there seemed to be several ways that you could play it. And it's very narrative, for one thing. I mean, it's very much the story of your survivors. But it's not just a PvP game. It's not like I'm going to make a group of zombies and you're going to make a group of survivors and then we're just going to keep fighting each other until, you know, one of us gets bored. That there can be the PvP of survivor versus survivor, which, you know, is obvious. Survivor versus zombie, but also survivor versus zombie, and other, you know, and combinations of those things, which seems really kind of exciting. One of the problems with Mordheim was always that the campaign could kind of get away from you. If you didn't have a large group of people playing the game, if you had like try to do a 2-player campaign, you would end up in situations where you would get a lot better than I would, and then there was just no way for me to deal with that, and I would get upset and I'd want to stop. But with Outbreak, it feels to me like if you wanted to have a more casual play, we could do survivor versus survivor, and we're both trying to kind of level our survivor groups, but also have a kind of competitive game while also trying to fight the zombies that are around. But at the same time, if we get into a situation where I'm getting ahead of you, we could say, well, you know what, let's do a certain scenario where I'm just, you know, you're out hunting for supplies and I just run Zeds against you. And so you have an opportunity to increase and to catch up, which is fantastic. You know, that's a really great way to do it. And you can almost have this, it becomes like just a step away from doing a role-playing game, which, you know, really role-playing games grew out of miniatures games. And I don't know how many people who aren't our age remember this. That it was essentially guys who were like just taking it and scaling closer and closer until you got to sort of an individual point with their miniatures gaming. And that's what skirmish gaming really is. It's almost like that proto role-playing game. And to me, that's just, I love that. I think that's really exciting. And so that's the fact that you are doing this campaign in this way even brings that out more to me.
Yeah, and that's really what we want to do. We are all about what we call narrative wargaming, right? Narrative wargaming is this blurred line between role-playing and wargaming. You know, we love role-playing, we love wargaming as they are, as their current development. But like you say, the two, one came from the other, you know, many moons ago. And we like to blur the line between the two. And, you know, nobody goes to the pub afterwards and talks about the great die roll they made. They all talk about, and did you see how we managed to kill that Zed? Or, oh man, and then he raged and we were in real trouble. And that was the bit that we always wanted to get from our games, is that we want to hear the guy down the pub who's having this conversation go, and man, I was so lucky to get away, you know, because those are the stories you remember. And those are the stories that get told 5 years from now. Nobody remembers what the dice roll was or what the figure, you know, they just remember the story. And so we've really concentrated on the story. And that was one of the key aspects of our campaigns. Is I played numerous campaigns where they just kind of grind to a halt. Because like you say, somebody's either so far ahead that you can't get there, or there's no way of being able to take the story to the next level. You've basically played all the scenarios, you've done all the elements. The concept that we came up with the point system was, if you don't generate sufficient points, then you're rolling on the kind of bad scenarios, which means things like you haven't got enough food, so you go out and get food. You've got people who are sick, so now you need to look for medicine. You've lost too many survivors, so now you need to go and look for recruits, right? So each one of these scenarios has got 3 or 4 different entities in it that you can go out and go and play. So it gives you a lot of replay, but also you can take the concept of the scenario and put it anywhere. Because one of the aspects we looked at is, if you watch any zombie movie, there's this 10, 15 minutes about how the group got together. You know, they were in a mall and this happened, or they were on an airliner and this happened, or they were in all these different things. And so we put that into the game. You know, it's an optional aspect, but you can roll to see how the group got together. And if you do, you get an advantage because it gives you one of your key heroes, right? If you don't want to play that, then of course you don't get the advantage and you play it through. But then, you know, it means that when we play, and there's 5 or 6 of us who regularly play test, you know, 2 of us might be playing, 4 of us might be playing, 6 of us might be playing. We can either one of us plays a zombie controller, or 2 or 3 of us, or actually nobody plays a zombie controller. Now we're all playing either individually as single figures, or we're actually playing as bands. So the whole point of the game was to be as open to the narrative as possible right through that. And from the feedback we're getting, people have responded to that at the moment, is what we're seeing. I mean, the game's still very new. It only launched at Gencon, so it's still kind of finding its feet, you know.
How did that go? How did Gencon go?
We had a huge uptake at Gencon, far better than, and you know, as it was our first ever Gencon, we were not really sure what to expect, right? It was fantastic, and we got interviewed just like we're having this conversation now by numerous people while we were there. 4 days of demoing. About day 2, I lost my voice almost completely. So some of those videos are really, really interesting to listen to because I'm just squeaking away. But yeah, we had the one thing we got was a real reaction to the game we could put out there. People were very, very interested in it, and they kept coming back and bring their friends. And what we would end up is, you know, you'd sell one copy to some guy because they played it, and then a couple of hours later, he'd come back with 4 of his friends, and all 4 of his mates would buy a set, so they'd all got a set so that they could go home and play. And there's nothing better than knowing that you've now got a bunch of buddies who are going to go play your game, because that's where it's exciting, you know. So that's where you want to know, is that people are going out there and really having fun playing your game. And, you know, we put the forums up and people are asking questions and there's erratas and bits and pieces. But the core aspect is that people are still really enjoying, loving playing your game. And there's nothing better than that. You know, it's what we do it for.
Well, and not only that, I mean, for me, like when I discover something like your games, for example, before that podcast interview, I'd never heard of you before, and I'd never heard of your games. But then it allowed me to sort of poke around and take a look, and I downloaded the demo version of Skirmish Sengen, which anybody can go download right now from what's the website?
Of Wargames Vault.
Okay, from Wargames Vault, and it's
or also it's Wargames Vault, and there's also skirmishsengen.com or skirmishsengenusa.com.
See, I was trying to push people towards your website.
I know, but I was trying to give people everybody, you know, every option.
But in any case, I was able to take a look at the rule structure for that game and see that, you know, it looked like you really knew what you were doing, which was nice. And then sort of apply what I saw there to what it sounded like you were doing with Outbreak, and being kind of excited about that. And then when I finally saw it, like the final product, I actually have I printed it out. So yeah. Now it's all blurry. It's very nicely put together. It's well laid out. It seems like you know what you're doing. Not what one expects when one discovers what seems like a brand new company out there in the wild doing miniatures games. So it's exciting for me, and that's the kind of thing, like if I were to go to Gen Con and go, I've never heard of you guys before. Wow, this looks really cool. Wow, this game is really fun. Yeah. So then you go home and you share it with everybody because, hey, you've probably never heard of this either, and this is why we're here now.
Absolutely.
Because I love that. I love that process of, hey, look at this thing. Look at this thing you don't know about. That's really awesome. Aren't I cool for discovering it?
Yeah. But I mean, that's true though. We are a very young company. You know, RDDP has only been around for 2.5 years. That first product was Skirmish Sengen. And it took us a long time to get traction with Skirmish Sengen. And then from there, we've put out the latest game, which is obviously Skirmish Outbreak. So, you know, and that's one of many things that we have in the works. But unfortunately, this isn't my full-time job. Otherwise, they'd come out a lot quicker. You know, I have to do a day job, and this is what we do around everything else. You know, we've got a lot of things in the works, and we really want to get them out there just as quick as we can. But, you know, real life sometimes gets in the way. So, for instance, in the middle of Skirmish Outbreak, you know, Chris's wife had a baby. That put a whole stop on bits and pieces that we had to do there. You know, modern life gets in the way sometimes. But we felt that the product that we got out was as good as we could get it at the time that we launched it. You know, we don't let it leave us until our baby is good and really good.
Oh, right. But I mean, even the Gen Con thing must have been a kind of a huge leap to make. It's not cheap, and it's really, really far away from you. And
Yes.
I mean,
We
that
are
was,
very fortunate. We're a New Zealand-based company, but we're very, very fortunate that we have a really good partner in the Phalanx Consortium, who are based in Richmond, Virginia.
oh,
So now they do. So all of our production is now done in the USA. We did start doing it in the UK, the USA, and New Zealand. The idea, because digital files can be passed around, as long as you can get them printed and delivered, it was all good. Anyway, because of a number of issues in different countries, we centralized everything in the US. So everything is actually created in the US now and then shipped externally from there. And as part of that, Phalanx Consortium are our people on the ground. So what happened was in the last trip is I flew to them in Richmond. We did Historicon and we launched Melanti Rangers, which was the new supplement for Skirmish Sang in there, and that was very well. And then we got everything ready for Gencon, and we traveled to Gencon in Indianapolis. And we did the whole Indianapolis aspect, which was for me brilliant, because not only did I get to meet the people who are playing my games, I've got a lot of friends in the industry, so I know all the guys from Chaosium. So we got to meet and have fun as well up there. So it was part holiday, part fun to go out there and sell my wares, and it was also great to see the reaction to audiences. And then then unfortunately I had to make the big trip back home. 24 hours later, I get back to New Zealand, because that's how long it took us to travel back. So unfortunately, we can kind of only do these things once every second year because it takes so much energy to do it. So we did Salute, which was the British one,
right,
2 years previously. We did America this year, and we did 2 while we were there, right? And the idea is that we will try our best to do 1 a year, but more likely is to do 1 every other year. Just to get out there, because there's nothing better than getting direct feedback from people who are standing in front of you and going, what about this? Or I've got this problem here, or this doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And then when you talk to them, they go, oh, now I've got it, right? And that direct feedback can then be kind of held internally and brought back. And when you write your next rules, you can go, now I remember people struggled with this. Let's resolve it. Let's get it clearer. Let's get it easier to work with. And so that's just the best feedback you can ever get, is real players. I mean, we had one chap at Gencon buy the rules on the first day. He came back the next day. He'd obviously read it overnight. And I have a list of questions. And I'm going, cool. Okay, what are your questions? And because we had the little demo board, we could set up his question and we could run through it. Ah, right, got it. And we went through each one of them. And so we spent probably 40 minutes talking through his questions. Then he went and spoke to other people, and that was viewed as a really good thing, that we were quite happy to answer questions. So then people would come back and talk to us about other things, and it kept more and more people, because we were on the Entrepreneurs Avenue, and I don't know whether you've been to Gencon. You're kind of pushed to the back of the room a bit, right? Yep. You are a bit of the, you're not in one of those big center aisle elements. But we had a steady stream of people constantly for 4 days, and it was and we had a team of 6, and it was about all we could handle.
Yeah, no, I was actually at Gencon last year, demoing airbrushes for Iwata.
Oh, cool.
And I was supposed to be there this year, but that plan sort of fell through. I was really disappointed, because that would have been awesome to be able to see you guys there.
Yeah.
And our booth was right next to the entrepreneur area that you're talking about. So I know exactly. But there's so many people there now.
Absolutely. I mean, we were lucky to get into the Entrepreneurs Avenue. I mean, it was fantastic. I mean, the one thing about Gencon is it's constantly oversold, so you're lucky if you get in.
Right.
And so even if I said, right, from now on we're always going to do Gencon, I can't guarantee I'm going to be there next year, because I have to go in the lottery like everybody else and see whether I get selected. And I will say this, is the Gencon people were absolutely fantastic. They did a massive job for us. I mean, we were a long way away. They would answer our emails. They would try and deal with us. They would push us in the right direction. As a group, they were utterly fantastic people who really, really helped us out big time.
Yeah.
Because it's different when you're in a different country. It's real different. Difficult trying to work out. How do you get insurance and all those kind of things in America? So yeah, they were cool. But I mean, in terms of just talking to our public who are playing games, and also we get people who knew us, who sort of bought Outbreak, who then went, oh, Skirmish Sang, and then people who did Skirmish Sang were like, oh, you've got Outbreak. And it was cool to see that crossover. And then, like, oh, it's a different rule set. So, well, it is different, but there are similarities. And then they begin, oh, yeah, I see what you're doing here.
So did you have Skirmish Outbreak at Historicon at all? Or was
we
it just
had a single book to show people. We refused to launch it at Historicon. We said, no, this is a Gencon release. You know, we had told everybody it was a Gencon release.
Well, I was just going to be curious I was going to be curious whether or not, like what the breakdown would have been in sales between one and the other at either of the cons.
Yeah.
But
so out of the two cons, sales-wise, for two different products, one Melanti Rangers, the other one Outbreak, were about even.
Oh, okay.
Right? But you just have a different crowd, you know?
Right.
The more historical gamer playing the more historical games is Historicon. That's what they do, you know? It's what it says on the box. You know, it's exactly brilliant environment.
Yeah.
Gencon is a much more diverse bunch of people. We had people who had never played a war game ever come and buy our rules.
Really?
They had no idea what a war game was. They knew what a role-playing game was, but they had no idea what a war game was. And they were like, and so they'd look at what we're doing, like, this is really cool. And can I do it like this? Like, you can do it any way you want, as long as you're happy playing it. Oh, that's really cool. You know? and so we got people into something that they hadn't necessarily thought about previously. You know, because they just viewed that, oh, we're role players, we don't do anything but role playing. And that's what I like about that blurred line is we're not one or the other in absolute. Right. We want to be at that point because we view it as a fun gaming industry. We enjoy all of the aspects of it. We want to be in both camps. We don't want to be one or the other.
Just out of curiosity, how do you feel about the whole competitive wargaming scene? Because that seems to be kind of a popular topic, especially now with Games Workshop really pushing hard away from that.
Yeah, I think it's done its dash, to be honest. I've never been a competitive wargamer. I find competitive wargaming two things. One, quite boring, because everybody brings their super army, right? And it doesn't matter how, you know, realism goes out the window, and it's just like, yeah, I'm going to bring this killer army, and it's just going to absolutely win the game. And it's like, I've got no interest in playing somebody who wants to play that way, right? Like I said to you before, I want to play the narrative. I want to play the story, right? But also, I think it became, it was pushed a little bit from Workshop, but really pushed to the nth degree in things like Flames of War. Now, a lot of people love to play that competitive game. And I think there will always be a groundswell of those people who like to play competitive games. Oh, sure. But that's not me, and it's definitely not the kind of games I write.
And those people believe that they drive the entire hobby. So
absolutely, and you know they drive a very thin slither, in my mind, of that hobby. and you know what? All good to them. If you're getting something out of this, because at the end of the day, we do this for fun, right? We do this for giggles. And if that's what rolls your dice, if that was spins your wheels, that's fantastic for you, but it does nothing for me personally. And what I like to do is play on that more cooperative, even if I'm playing against you, I might actually do something that is not necessarily in my advantage because it makes for a better story. You know, and you might, and if you see me play that way, you go, well, actually, he was cool over here. I'm going to be cool over here and be negative to myself because it makes for a better story. And what happens is at the end of that, you come away and go, that was so much fun. And because at the end of that, we want, right? The fun aspect. And I think you can get too competitive, and the fun goes out of it. And it's all about winning.
Well, I've been playing a lot more skirmish gaming recently. Normally with Song of Blades and Heroes.
Oh yeah.
With a buddy of mine, and like we had a game a few weeks back where he had a little halfling who was up against my the leader of my war band, and I was rooting for the halfling. You know, like, like he was fighting me, and he got in this really good swing, and I was like, oh my god, that is so awesome. Yeah. That he was able to kill my warband leader, and for me that was like I was just tickled by that. So, but
you'll always remember that story, right? You'll remember the day your warband leader got took out by a halfling, you know, and that's really what we're talking about here. You know, I mean, look, the one thing that I also note is, you know, you get a lot of people who stop playing games but continue to write. Right. Throughout the industry. And again, it's not a critique of them, but I think, you know, I play games every week. Now, it's not necessarily my games every week, but I play games every week, right? Mm-hmm. I'm playing role-playing games every week, and I'm playing war games every week. And I think the further away you get from actually playing these things, the more you get into that whole, oh, the points must be a perfect balance. Oh, we must be using these dice rather than those dice. I look at games as, I want a good balanced game. Nobody wants a game where it's just so in one way or the other, right? I want all those things, but at the same time, I won't sacrifice story aspect and fun for the sake of making it, the ultimate uber perfect game. Because what happens is they just become boring games, right?
And that's fantastic.
From my aspect.
No, I totally agree with you. I understand. A lot of people want to do, they essentially want to be playing chess or, another game that with sort of perfect sides where they can really pit their intelligence against the other person's intelligence. And I get that. I totally get that. It's not me, but I get that there are people who are into that. But the fact that, and I think this is, again, why I was so enthralled by your interview on M&M is that I sensed a like mind,
Cool.
I sensed that we were coming at this from the same direction, and it looks like that is true. My biggest problem is I mentioned to you that I was hoping to be able to play at least one game of this before we did this interview, and I realized as I started looking around my miniatures collection that I have almost nothing in terms of minis that are appropriate. And so I have since been looking, I was like, somebody's got to have a cheap copy of Zombicide around that I can just pill. I don't care about playing that game, but I want all the minis because then I could just set them out and we could play. But for example, I have played Zombicide. It's okay. It's fun. It feels a little bit more like a puzzle game. I'm not getting out of it what I think I would be getting out of your game, for example, but I had a good time playing it. But really, if I buy a copy, it's so that I could get the minis. So I just have a collection ready to go to play your game.
So, I mean, when you're talking about minis as well, some really good plastic zombies, studio miniatures, right? They're basically, come out of the box ready to go. Obviously you need to paint them, etc. But relatively cheap studio miniatures from the UK. So again, look for them. And that's one of the things that we do. I mean, we create our own miniatures for Skirmish Hanging, and we are creating our own miniatures for Outbreak. But we don't have one of these rules. It's like you have to use our miniatures for our games. It's like use any miniatures you can find, anything that that really works for you. Because a lot of Survivor miniatures can be found from all sorts of different games, right? Because as long as they look like how you want your Survivor guy to be, then that's cool. Whether you want the girl with a katana or you want the guy running down the street with an AK-47, that's all good. And these can be found literally across the board from different manufacturers and things. So what we're saying is, choose any miniatures you want to play this game and enjoy the aspect. But for getting your zombies, because you want probably about 24 zombies as a core set, right? 24 zombies because you can reuse the zombies is enough, right? And there's a great box sets out there of plastic zombies that are not going to cost the earth and get the game started really quick.
Right. No, I've certainly been looking.
I
haven't yet populated that part of my collection yet.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that we have a plan coming up in the near future, and I can't say when it is because we're still trying to work out the process, is that we are planning to bring out a box set version of Skirmish Outbreak that will actually have sufficient miniatures to play the game.
That's fantastic. Right? You don't see.
But we're in the process of sorting that out, right? So currently, you can buy the rule set as is, which is a rule set, and you can go play with any miniatures you want. Even when we produce the box set, you can still play with any miniatures you want, but you should have enough miniatures in the box to start the game. So that's coming soon, but that's all I can say because we're still trying to work out how we actually create this and get it distributed and sorted and source all the bits and pieces. So yeah, once we've got more information, we will be putting that up on our blog. We'll be putting it up in the forum. We'll be putting it up on the website.
Would that be something that you might be kickstarting?
We have looked at the kickstarting aspect of that. At the moment, like I say, we are still trying to refine the entities, the elements. Once we've got more of an idea, we would definitely look to see whether we kickstart that.
Okay.
But at the moment, we have a lot of the elements, but we're still looking at do we source our own zombies or do we source zombies from somewhere else?
Right.
So that's what we're looking at the moment. Do we put the zombies in metal or do we put the zombies in plastic? Because everybody will want the survivors to be in metal because they're easier, nicer miniatures, etc. And then the plastic miniatures, you want less conversions and bits and pieces to it. So it's about trying to work out the basis between the elements.
From my own personal perspective, as long as they're not that plastic that Mantic uses, you can use whatever you want.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
I know people refer to it
that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, people refer to that plastic as restic, but resin plastic really means nothing. So I hate using that term.
Yeah.
So that's in the future. Got it.
Yeah. But as part of the ongoing support for the game is we're currently writing the next set of scenarios. That's a book that will be coming out probably first quarter of next year, and that's called Contagion. Right? So we'll have Outbreak and then Contagion. And yeah, so the idea is we don't just put it out there and leave it. We are going to provide things for people. We've got some other bits and pieces in the works that we're looking at. It's worth. But the one thing that I always found with rule set is you buy a rule set and then there'd be nothing for it, nothing to support it, and it would wither on the vine because there was nothing new to play with it. So what our aim is with all of our games is to keep a level of support up. With Skirmish Outbreak, every month we give away a free scenario online, and it's a proper designed scenario, right? It's not just like a Word document to download. It's a proper, fully designed, fully looking element that we push out there. We are not quite at that point yet with Skirmish Outbreak, but what we're looking at is probably every second month we're going to start putting out free scenarios for players and for Outbreak players. So the idea is to put some of the stuff out there for guys to refresh, have new ideas, etc., and then keep a set of source books that come out, probably once or twice a year to try and support the game as well. So the idea being is that it's an ongoing aspect. You don't need these elements. If you're just happy with what you've got and you want to play with it, that's all good. We never change the core rules, right? Anything extra we add is things that we've been asked. So for instance, one of the things you can't do currently in Outbreak is use vehicles. Because the idea is it's 3 or 4 months into it, the vehicles have been standing around, all the batteries are dead. That was our mindset to it. People have said, well, what about vehicle rules? So we're looking at vehicle rules now. Should we put them in? Shouldn't we put them in? Now, I'm not going to say they're going to get delivered. We're still looking at it because mechanics sometimes will work or won't work in certain ways.
Now, do you have them in Skirmish Singing?
I'm sorry, you're breaking up a bit.
Are there vehicle rules in Skirmish Singing?
Yes, there are vehicle rules in Skirmish Singing.
Okay.
But again, they're secondary to the kind of the infantry aspect of the game. Right. They're more support type vehicles, but they have their own rule set, etc. But of course, the one thing that everybody in the zombie apocalypse wants to do is, can I run down zombies in my car, right? Which is a different thing than a military game, right? A military game is like, how can I bring my heavy weapon to bear? In a zombie game, it's like, how can I run down zombies in a car? And what does that do? How many zombies under the front wheels stop the car and all these kind of things. So, these are the cool things that we're looking at the moment.
Got it. Okay. So, yeah, your Skirmish Outbreak people aren't looking to load up a striker and go off into the wilderness.
Yeah, no, they're looking at, I've got this car and I'm going to use it as a weapon.
So one thing we haven't done is we haven't really had you dive into the mechanics at all. Do you think you might want to? Are you having trouble hearing me?
I'm really struggling to hear what you're saying. Sorry.
Okay. Well, I'm just hoping that other people can hear me. Do you want to dive into the mechanics a little bit? Talk about how the game
plays,
functions. Yeah.
Okay. Now, as Chris will tell you, if you get to talk to Chris, I've always got the next rule set in my head rather than the one I've just written. So what I'll do is we'll come to games and I'll start doing things. It's like, Colin, wrong game. I'm like, right. So I apologize up front if I come up with the wrong elements. But broadly speaking, right, it all works on a D20 system. Okay, you have an ability So, for instance, we have our civilian, and it's the day of the outbreak, right? Now, civilians are very, very unskilled. Now, if he's got a pistol on the day of the outbreak, he may have a skill of 5 or 6 to use this pistol, right, on a D20. So he's got to roll under 6 on a D20. So you'd roll that, but what you'd also add is plus or minus modifier. So if someone's running towards him, if he's running, if he's hiding, if he's taking advantage of cover, all these things are taken into account as pluses and minuses. Are you still there?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
No, it's just everything's frozen.
Is it?
Right, I can hear you now. Sorry, apologies. It's just
no. It's okay. Everything looks good on this side. Okay.
All good then. I'll keep talking. I didn't want it to be talking to empty air. But anyway, so basically,
what'll be interesting is to see what it looks like when it's finally uploaded to YouTube. So
definitely. So you add your pluses and minuses. You make your dice roll. Do you hit? If you hit, you then you roll and what kind of level of damage you do. Now, and a pistol will roll is a D20 damage. So if I roll more than 9 or more, I kill the zombie outright. Okay, so it's really basic mechanic. Okay, the elements come when if we've got rages. Rages take a bit more damage to kill. They move faster. But in terms of the core mechanic is I will roll for my action points at the beginning of the game. So I'll roll for each survivor I've got. I'll roll a 1d3 or 1d6 halved if you don't have a 1d3. That gives me a collection of action points. Now I must spend at least 1 action point per survivor. Okay, and I'll choose my 1 survivor. So this is the civilian. He's going to shoot. So I'll spend 1 AP for him to shoot the target. He shoots that successfully. I've now got, say I'd rolled 5 APs because I've got a number of players. I can now allocate 1 to all the others and then come back to this guy again and spend action points. Or I can spend 2 action points on somebody else or whatever. I can divide my action points as I want, but I take them 1 at a time. When I've finished my action, the zombie controller now can move through. He rolls his dice. He rolls. He starts with 3 dice, and every time he gets more zombies, he adds more dice to it, and he can move up to 3 zombies, 2 APs per turn. So basically, what happens is, 1 civilian goes, 3 zombies move. Another civilian goes, 3 zombies move. Now the zombies, unfortunately, are very slow. They're only moving 3 inches at a time, right? Whereas your survivors are moving 6 inches for every AP, so they can usually keep ahead of it. But the idea being is that you only go down to a horde of zombies. 1 survivor to 1 zombie, the survivor will win every time. 1 survivor to 2 zombies, the survivor is going to win most of the time. 1 survivor to 3 zombies, it's getting tight. And if you get the 4th zombie in there, you're going down, right? So the idea is to keep the distance. But of course, the other aspect being is every time you pull that trigger, bang, right? That's loud. Now I get to roll as a zombie controller for extra zombies because they're being drawn to the noise, right? So as the game plays, and if I was using a shotgun, that's very loud. I get to roll twice for that one. Okay, so as the zombie controller, you get to add more and more zombies onto the board, and as survivors, you're desperately trying to move away and keep out of the way and be quiet and do things. So that's the premise of the game. And if one of my survivors gets bitten, they could be lucky and not get infected. They could be unlucky and get infected but take a couple of rounds to change, or they could be really, really unlucky and rage that instant. And basically what happens then is that survivor goes over to the zombie controller, and as the zombie controller turn comes around, you go, right, this is raging, he's right next to him, first thing he's going to do is attack the nearest person. And then he spends his APs and works through that. So it's through the same process. So the worst thing you can have on the board against you is your own guy converted to a rager. Right. And that's one of those aspects we like. It's your guy. It was your guy that was there. It was whatever you named him, and he may have lasted the last 3 episodes. Suddenly he turns and it's like, oh my god, I've got to put this guy down. I've got to put him down quick because he fights a lot better. He moves faster. He's far more aggressive than your standard Z, right? So this is that concept. It's always this balancing act again. It's balancing how many IPs have I got this round. What can I do? How can I put myself in the positions that I'm not going to expose myself, but also try and protect each other, And it's that balancing act between the whole aspect that makes for a fun game, right? And at the same time, I have a mission, which is I've got to get to this building, and every building I go into, I roll for threats and roll for what I find, right? So if I can roll in here and I've got 300 points of resources, that's great. I've now got 300 points of resources, but it's protected by 3 zombies. Now I have to kill the zombies before I get those resources.
Right.
So
And
that's
so the interesting thing there is that, of course, you may or may not also be dealing with an enemy survivor team who's also out trying to scavenge resources. So there's that, PvE versus PvP aspect of this that I just really like.
The one thing that if you read or watch any of the kind of post-apocalypse movies, it's always survivors versus survivors. It's always this aspect being is, humanity doesn't all collect together and go, yeah, we'll survive for the common good. It's right equals might type aspect. I'm going to kick enough butt to get the things I want, right? And that's really what we wanted to put in there. And we've had some absolute corker of games where you have 2 survivors groups who are fighting for the same aspect. And they don't even know where the bit is on the board, which means they have to visit every building on the board as well as have each other. And where people are deliberately shooting other people, and they don't want to kill them, they want to wound them so that the zombies go towards them rather than go towards the noise and all this kind of stuff. It's like, let's hope I roll low so it just wounds you. You get all this kind of aspect going into the game, right?
I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
So those aspects of play and role play and narrative come back into it, and of course the zombies are going, okay, there's a noise over there, we all run over here, and then now there's a noise over here. Well, some of us run over there, right? And now it's like, okay, well, I've got a whole load of zombies here, and I've got a whole load of zombies here holding these 2 teams, and they're going, well, I want to kill him, but I've actually got to deal with this threat of the zombies now, and the zombie controller's just rubbing his hands going, yep, you keep making the noise, I'll keep adding the zombies. Because also there's another aspect with it. You don't have to have a zombie controller. You can run the zombies just as a kind of an AI. There's an aspect that you can the game can run the zombies for you, and that's also a cool way to play. Is get the zombies played by the game, and you get 2 of you playing survivors. So then you're going, okay, how's this going to work? So there's always a different way to play the games, and you can get more out of it from playing that aspect. And that's what we try to do is make it. It's not a I played this game. I played 6 times. It's like, I'm kind of bored now. I want to do something else. The idea is like you can play it 6 times and say, well, there's still some future with it. I can still play this game.
Right. So
because that's always been my issue around board games. Is you play a board game, you have an absolute hoot, but many board games are the same game, and there's only so many times I want to play that before I put it in a box and put it on the in the shelf, and then 12 months later I go, I haven't played that for 12 months. Now let's get it down.
Right. Yeah, and well, with the investment one tends to do with miniatures games, you kind of hope that you can get that kind of replayability about it. Yeah. Now there is a morale system in the game.
There is a morale system. If you're playing against zombies, morale, just you and against zombie player, morale doesn't tend to come into the game too often, right? Mm-hmm. But when you're playing against person to person, morale comes into the game far more often. Right, so basically what happens is if you take if you're fired at, you'll end up having to take a morale test. And what that means is at the beginning of your next action, before you do anything, you take a morale test and see what happens. And that you can lose the next round because you've been forced to do something, or you can go, no, I'm not worried about that, and continue and do your action. And that just means that you've burnt an AP that you couldn't do something with because you were under fire, or right. Those kind of aspects. Morale tends to not come into so much with the zombies because, like we said, we've put this 3 to 6 months into the zombie apocalypse. People are aware of what zombies are and do, so they've got that frightening aspect that you get, like the kind of screamer movie aspect. But also you've got this idea is that that there's no reasoning, you have to fight. The only way out is to fight your way out. So right. Rather than do you roll on the morale table and suddenly you're pinned and then the zombies just win, we removed all that. So the morale is more around human to human contact. There are right. a couple of places where you can, so for instance, when you see your buddy turn into a rager, if you're a good 24 inches away, you take a morale test because now that's the most frightening thing on the board, right?
Right.
But if
not only that, it's the most disconcerting thing on the board. That was your best buddy. That's the guy that you grew up with. That you've survived so far. You survived 6 months of zombie apocalypse, and suddenly he's raging. How do you think that makes you feel? Make a roll. Okay, So there is a morale aspect to it, but that is it's not your traditional wargaming morale, which is like now we break and we run away, or now we stop.
It's got a little bit more of a viable opportunity in there. You know, it doesn't stop you dead, but it does have some issues.
It's almost like it's depleting your resources with your action points being resources.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's that sort of aspect. And then the other aspect of the big overview of the game is for campaign play, each player creates their team and they spend X amount of points. So we might decide we're going to have an intro game. We're going to spend 250 points apiece. And I can spend 250 points virtually in two miniatures, or I could spend it in 10 miniatures, right? And you spend your 250 points. In that game, that team now has to make 250 points worth of resources. If it doesn't, it's going on the negative. What it means by that is these resources are food, water, ammunition, clothing, shelter, all those kind of things. But we've just called them resources at this point, right?
Right.
So if you come back and you only got 200 out of 250, you then roll on another table to see what the next scenario is. And that scenario tells you what basically has happened to your group. So if you didn't make it and you got and you rolled low, one of the first ones is you didn't have enough food. So you went out exploring and you simply didn't find enough food. So your next scenario is all about going and finding food. Another one might be illness. So now you've gone out and survived this. Now you've all got really heavy colds or bronchitis or something that's going to reduce your team. So a couple of your team members don't get to go on the next mission, but now you need to go to that deserted pharmacy and go in and get some drugs for these guys, right? And of course, the deserted pharmacy just happens to have, does it have zombie? You roll, and it could have zombies in it. It could have the mad sniper in there. The mad sniper is one of these elements that we've got in that he rolls each turn to decide whether he's shooting zombies or whether he's shooting survivors, right?
Right.
He's absolute. If he's shooting survivors this turn, he's shooting survivors. He's shooting zombies. So sometimes he can be helping you, and sometimes he can be killing you. So you got those aspects. Other times you've got other survivors who boarded up their building, and they don't want you breaking in and getting anything, so they're going to try and protect it, right? So all these aspects of the story get put in there.
Yeah.
And they come from not surviving, not getting enough resource points. Now, if you get more than enough resource points, say you got 500 resource points, you get to spend those resource points buying extra equipment, because this is what you've just found. You may have found a shotgun somewhere. You may have found some police body armor, stab-proof vest, really cool, or a helmet or something like this, right? And so you're adding that to it. But the problem is now you've got all this kit. You've now got 500 points of kit. You now need to generate 500 points in the next game. And what this does is it stops those games where it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and you suddenly have a killer army, because now you're actually going to struggle and actually have more and more things go wrong with your group, because the bigger it gets, the more resources you need for that group.
Right.
And that's one of the key aspects that we've tried to put in there. So it stops you getting this enormous kitted out, got every piece of body armor, every gun, every weapon, and we're indestructible. Well, you have that, but now just the nature of things, like you will starve, you will not have enough water, you will have disease, you will have, all these things will start occurring more often.
So which is better as you're starting out? Is it better to have a small group that is well kitted out, or a large group that all has sticks with nails in them?
Well, you know what? I played this game for, I've probably played this game for probably 18 months, right?
Yep.
And I know me and Chris wrote the rules together, right?
Yep.
You would get a different answer from each of us.
That's great.
And what I mean by that is it's down to your style of play, right? Now, if you're one of these people that are quite happy to go, right, I'm gonna have more people so I can get them all over the area, but they're going to be less. And that helps me find the resource. And then I have one or two strong ones that will run to the resource, get the resource, and get it off the board. You go for the bigger unit. If you're more the kind of right, I'm going to stock up on 2 or 3 really good guys. We'll fight our way out of any trouble. That's also going to work, or it may not work. And there's no killer ability. It's about your style of play and what works best for you, because both of them are successful methods. But in the wrong player's hands, they will absolutely fall apart on you.
That's fantastic. That's actually really wonderful to hear.
And that's one of the things we spent a long time trying to get that balance, where it will fall apart if you play it wrong. And because that's the idea, right? Everything falls apart in the zombie apocalypse because you're really just doing the best you can to survive.
Right. Hey, so we're coming up on an hour here, and I think we've actually
Okay.
covered things pretty well.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for spending time with me.
Thank you. I mean, it was really good. I've really enjoyed the chat, but also really good. Thank you very much for giving us all the advice that you have over the last few weeks about trying to get Skirmish Outbreak out there to a bigger audience and taking the time to help us do this. We really appreciate it.
Like I said, it's a disease. I have this weird, like, I need to help people do better.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Keep at it. It's good.
But great. So thank you very much. We should do this again at some point in the not too distant future, because this has been a fun conversation, and I'd love to hear, like, maybe when you have your next project scheduled.
Be more than happy to.
Okay. Fantastic.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right. And we'll talk to you later.
See ya. Bye.
Bye-bye.